go into our homes, you see lots of Japanese consumer electronics. Sometimes you even watch Japanese movies or movies with Japanese cultural aspects in them, like the samurai, the ninja, very, very, very popular amongst people from all walks of life. But what is the reciprocity in this? How popular is Ghana and Africa in Japan? What does the everyday Japanese person think of Africa and Ghana in particular?
Perhaps I should add one word to what you described about my professional career. I started my Japanese diplomatic career in Ghana, covering not only Ghana but 9 other African countries, even West Africa, back in the early 90s. At the time, many African countries became independent. Of course, Ghana was the first to become independent after the Second World War. Therefore, many Japanese people paid attention to Africa. Of course, in general terms, but in reality, there was not much contact, not much substance to that friendly feeling on the part of Japan towards Africa. But I should add, except for Ghana, because Ghana was already well known to many Japanese because of Dr. Noguchi Hideo, who came here to study how to solve the question of yellow fever back in 1927, and he died here. So Ghana was well known in Japan, perhaps the only African country known as an individual country back in Japan. Nevertheless, not much contact between Ghana and Japan in terms of trade or in terms of official assistance, even in terms of investment. At the time, for instance, Japanese people imported chocolate made from Ghanaian cocoa beans, but in Europe. But now Japan imports cocoa directly from Ghana to produce chocolate. And one of the first chocolate that was produced in Japan had the name of Ghana chocolate. Then people came to know another face of Ghana being a very, very important producer of cocoa beans, which became chocolate in Japan.
So that was a quick look at Africa or Ghana, Japan,
yes.
Then Ghana, Japan now. What does the future look like, or what could the future look like, Doctor?
Well, if I am to speak about the overall relationship between Africa and Japan, it didn't start until the 1980s. I repeat, Japanese people had generally very friendly feeling, and I think vice versa. That's the way I felt living in Ghana or visiting other West African countries. African people have, in general, a very friendly feeling towards Japan, but nevertheless, no concrete, substantive cooperation. But that started, developing in the 80s. But in the case of Ghana, it started much earlier. And I mentioned Dr. Noguchi Hideo, and I was in charge of Japan's official assistance for many years. And one of the first concrete examples of Japan's cooperation to Ghana is the establishment of Noguchi Institute at the University of Ghana with Japanese donation. I myself promoted in the 70s. But coming back to the overall cooperation, relationship with African countries, it started in the 80s, and I promoted, being responsible for Japan's aid. And then that came to concrete fruition in the form of the creation of TICAT in 1993.
When we look at the history of Japan's economic success after the Second World War, you can notice a few similarities or parallels between the situation in terms of its socio-economic indicator that was faced by Japan and that which is faced today by many African countries, with one significant difference. Africa is rich in natural mineral resources. Japan is rich in technology and innovation, historically and even to the present day. How can Ghana and Japan, for example, work more closely together to satisfy each other's needs or hopes for a better life?
Well, you mentioned various types of Japan's cooperation. One of them is what we call technical cooperation, which involves sending Japanese young volunteers and Japanese experts to Ghana, but also receiving experts and trainees from Ghana. At the moment, we have, for instance, about 60 Japanese young volunteers working here, but altogether, the accumulated number of Japanese young volunteers who had worked in Ghana are more than 1,000. And Japan had also sent about 800 experts. So altogether, 1,800 Japanese experts have had the experience of working together in Ghana with Ghanaian people, with the Ghanaian experts. And Japan has received 1,200 experts and trainees from Ghana. So in that way, Japan is making enormous contribution to transmitting Japan's experiences, Japan's technology to Ghanaian experts. I think that way Japan is contributing to educating and training Ghanaian people, because that is a key of Japan's success. That must be the key of African success and also the key of Ghanaian success. You mentioned how Japan did after the Second World War, but I would like to go back to what Japan did in the late 19th century. Japan was a totally closed country until the middle of the 19th century. Then Japan started opening. Then Japan had no natural resources, but I would like to also add Japan is a country with loads of natural disasters. You remember what happened in Japan 2 years ago? Big earthquake, big tsunami that destroyed northern Japan, killing 20,000 people. So with these handicaps, the Japanese government, established in the late 19th century, decided we must provide education to young Japanese. That's the key to Japan's success. And Japan allocated, or the Japanese government allocated, but 1/3 of the government budget to education. And the same after the Second World War. So educating people, training people is a key to development, economic
Education.
and social development of Africa and of Ghana as well.
Education, very important, no doubt. When it comes to importance, where would you think the focus should lie, the concentration of resources? Should it be at the government to government level? Should it be at the non-governmental organization, non-profit level? Or should it be at the private, for-profit level? Where do you see the biggest future growth for Japan-Ghanaian relations? In the government sector, non-governmental, i.e. non-profit, or private for-profit sectors?
All these types of cooperation must go hand in hand. At the moment, government-to-government cooperation is in progress. But I must add, there is not much Japanese private investment in Ghana. There are many Japanese companies very active, involving in important project. That happened even in the early 60s when I was here. I remember, Japan provided 2 large-scale ships to Black Star Line, national shipping company, with very long-term payment. But nevertheless, not much investment up to now. And Japan's investment in Africa is growing. Nevertheless, in a limited number of countries so far, not much in Ghana. But I know there are several important investment projects now, being seriously examined by Japanese enterprises. Investment is a key to future development. So I repeat, responding to a question, all these types of cooperation you have mentioned, government-to-government cooperation, cooperation in the private sector, cooperation at the level of NGOs, and also I should mention cooperation between universities and higher education institutions. These must go hand in hand.
Well, we almost ran out of time, but I'd like us to touch on cultural cooperation or cultural exchange. And there are lots of elements to Japanese culture that seem to mirror or echo in our part of the world, in Ghana, in Africa. For example, drumming.
Yes, that's right.
Then there's, spirituality and religion. There's the history of warrior tradition and culture. Do you think that we could have a bit more vibrancy in our cultural exchanges at every level? Music, film, history, drama, theater, and so on and so forth, between Ghana and Japan?
I definitely agree with you. That's the way I felt back in the early 60s when I was here. A lot of similarity between Japan and Ghana in the area of traditional culture. Music is a very typical example. There has been a little bit of a cultural exchange, but not very much. This is a new area we must explore and we must promote further.
Thank you very much. I was speaking to Dr. Koichiro Matsura. He's a former Director General of UNESCO. He'll be delivering a lecture this afternoon at the Accra International Conference Center. If you can make it there by 3 p.m., you might get in. And then you can ask Dr. Matsura your own personal question.